The following program is a UWTV classic.
From the University of Washington in Seattle, Upon Reflection.
Hello and welcome to Upon Reflection. I'm Marcia Alvar. For decades, the works of sculptor Everett DuPen have been part of the Northwest landscape, in public buildings, private collections, and in churches throughout our region. Maybe you've walked by the Walnut screens he created for Seattle City Hall, or relaxed by the fountain he designed for the 1962 World's Fair at Seattle Center. A nationally acclaimed award-winning artist, he is best known for his figurative works, rendered in a variety of media, including wood, metal, and stone. DuPen is Professor Emeritus of Art at the University of Washington, where he has taught for almost 50 years. Everett DuPen, welcome to Upon Reflection.
Thank you. It's not 50 years. I wished it were.
Now, if you could describe this to me, the factors that went into shaping your style as an artist, the vision you have of the kind of works you create.
First of all, you have to take into consideration the material from which this has been created. And the material responds to you as you carve. And it seems normally to just develop. It's an evolutionary process of development in your materials. Now, of course, in bronze goes through three different phases. It goes through the initial phase of making it in clay, perhaps, and making a mold out of plaster or rubber. And then it goes into wax, and then from wax you touch it up and it goes into bronze. So there are many different facets that you have to be proficient in to be able to cast in bronze. Now, normally I do all my touching up if the thing isn't too big. If it's a large sculpture, I have help, of course, on the foundry.
You've said that really the trick to sculpture is sort of getting rid of everything that's superfluous, so that the essence or the spirit of the piece emerges.
Yes.
I mean, it sounds very mystical. Is there any way to explain how you know when that's happening?
It's very difficult because you always want to elaborate. And the most difficult thing in the world is to do away with just that. That is unimportant to the piece. It doesn't show the essence of the piece that you have in mind. Remember that the first thing that you're trying to do is express. Expression is the first thing. The second thing is form. And the third thing is the technique of working in your materials. So all of these things have to be worked together. And when you have a good piece of sculpture, when you're satisfied, it doesn't happen very often, when you're satisfied with what you have done, you have this amalgamation of different things working for you, and it works out.
We're going to take a look at some slides that will actually give us some idea of how it actually happens, exactly what you've just described. Yeah. And we're looking now at some models.
Well, this was an art form template, which was formed from a drawing and is put on the wood itself, drawn around it, and the surplus is cut away from it. It's an easier approach than trying to carve all of that surplus wood away. And then, of course, I do it from the other side to give it the side of the piece. Not all the way around, but just from the front and from a side.
So it's a flat, kind of a one-dimensional.
Yes. And then from there we go directly into the volume of the piece. That is the third dimension, like my slide shows here, or will show. And this piece was made for the Visitation Center in Federal Way.
And this is more of a close-up of that same piece that we just saw.
Yes, that's true. This is the one that's almost finished. And of course it will be stained later so that you don't see the striations in the wood itself.
Now this is you working on a piece that's pretty well known to people who spend any time on the university campus.
Yes, this was a delightful occurrence on my part because I had Professor or Dr. Odegaard posing directly in the University of Washington sculpture lab. And he insisted on having the students drop in all the time. And I'm a kind of a man that likes to work in privacy. I don't like that.
Now, from the University of Washington to Dallas, Texas.
Yes, well, this piece was done in 1982. And I did not want to do this section in bronze because I knew from the very start that it presented a great deal of engineering problem. But I was persuaded by my engineer to go ahead with it. He said it's stable enough. Both of us had not considered that Dallas is one of the windiest cities in the United States. And lo and behold, when it was installed, I could see it actually moving.
Oh,
and
moving
the
in that
flagpole was
strong
moving,
wind.
and this was moving, and I said, oh my goodness. Now this is the studio, and this is how it was done. It was done, first of all, with a welded frame with a slippable joint in the arm section, both arm sections. And then the styrofoam was put on top of that, and it was sculptured. And then on top of that, the plaster was added to that and built directly in plaster. This is not a casting job. And this is it when it's finished in the plaster, before it was disassembled for the bronze caster. And so it does present a problem here.
And then this is an installation.
This is the installation, yes.
So it really, there are so many different talents that are involved in working on a piece of sculpture. I mean, you're an
Yes.
engineer, you're a
Yes.
creative artist,
Yes.
all those different things come
Yes,
together.
I would strongly advise anybody in the sculpture to study a course in engineering, because you need it. You have to lift things, you have to haul things, you have to use drop lines, you have to use all kinds of things like this, you know. Plus you have to know the weight and how to handle all these things.
Now, how did you develop the tactile sense for developing figures? And in figurative sculpture, I mean, how do you teach your hands?
I don't know, I've always done sculpture. My mother found me, I hate to say this, at 3 years old at the Panama Pacific World's Fair in San Francisco, looking at the statuary. I was looking at the statuary. And why I was doing this, I don't know. But I started very early. My mother gave me plastiline to work with, and I started in 13 years old from there on out to have a little more technical knowledge of what I was doing.
I was wondering if part of what you learned happened in a very early teaching assignment that you had. It was shortly after you were out of art school, living in St. Louis, and you taught in at least what looks on paper to be two very different places. One,
Yes.
a fine arts school at Washington University in St. Louis,
Yes.
and the other in the College of Mortuary Science.
Must we go into that? No, this was quite a revealing experience, I must say. And my job there was to prepare the human bodies and faces, whatever the case might be, that had to be repaired. To repair them with collodion and cotton and waxes and cosmetics. And I was considered to be a professor of cosmetology. So, yeah, that was an experience.
But that must have given you certainly a knowledge of the human body and how it's structured and how it responds that would be invaluable to your work as an artist.
What I take away from that was my impression of death and what happens to the human body. I had to consider working on it just like I work on a piece of meat or whatever. It was a terrible experience. This is a human being. And I had to completely change over. And I had to do this thing in a very objective manner, you know. And how was I going to do this? I didn't know. It took me a long time to get emotionally
Switching back and forth between the two different kinds of teaching.
I didn't do this by my likes. I didn't want to do this as a professor of cosmetology. But I had to, because I had a half-time teaching position at the university.
Now, we took a look at a number of pieces that were in process, and I was thinking as we were looking at those, is it hard to give them up? I mean, you spend all of this time creating a piece. Is is it really hard to say goodbye to them sometimes?
Well, yes, it is, because you know you stay with this such a long period of time, it becomes part of you. It's your baby, and if it has to be changed, it has to be cleaned, there has to be things. I want to be in on this situation completely. And many times, one of my pieces of sculpture was sold, and I don't know to whom, and this bothers me. This bothers me no end. And so, yes, it is a difficult thing. But I don't think they can become too emotionally involved with a commission, because you have to exercise a certain objectivity when you do a commission. This is done for the general public, or for the whole public. If you do a piece like it's done for your family or yourself, yes, this becomes a little bit of a problem.
When you do a piece that's intended to be in a public place, and you know a lot of people are going to be going by and looking at it, when you create the piece, are you thinking of the kind of relationship you want people to have with that?
First of all, I would consider the site and what is needed and the kind of expression that has to come from this site in this position. And that's why I say you have to exercise a little objectivity when you do this. You can't just sail into it and be personal, too personal with what you do. And this is my particular criticism of much of contemporary art, that emphasizes that a sculptor doing public artwork must be completely subjective. And this is wrong. You've got to exercise this other side of your nature.
A partnership.
Yes, yes, yes. Complete. You never do anything you don't want to do.
I was reading a description of a piece that you did in 1984 that's cited in Edmonds by the library, called
Yes.
Vision. It's a
Yes.
young man with his arms upraised.
Yes.
And they interviewed a woman who was from the community taking a look at the piece as it was being installed. And she said, well, she worried about that, because she said there's a lot of kids in the area, and she worried that they might want to touch it or even to
Yes.
dress it up.
Yeah. Well, I had that question asked of me when I dedicated this sculpture. Are you happy with putting a ballet gown on this man? And I said, no. The first place, men don't wear that kind of ballet gown. And I said, I don't think a piece of sculpture needs to be dressed up. You know, it does its thing without you don't have to do this. But if they want to, yes, they can do it. It's theirs. It's not mine any longer. Do what you want to. But I wouldn't think that you'd want to do that.
It's kind of a sign of fondness, though. You think of a sculpture like Waiting for the Interurban, that people
Yes.
just cannot seem to stop dressing up in various ways. And it's
Yeah.
a way the public has of really
Yeah.
touching an artist's
Yeah.
work.
And Richard Barr loves this sort of thing. And, you know, but I don't. I don't want them to do that. I don't know why. I guess it's my formal training. Maybe too much formal training. I don't know. I had fun. I had fun making the sculpture in my studio. That's true. I had a lot of problems. I had great problems with the art commission on this. But we finally got all that ironed out. And I wanted to do a diver. I had a diver specified for that location. And yes, they passed judgment on it, and they said, yes, we'd love the diver. And then they decided, after midstream, that they would love to have this thing standing up. And I said, no diver, I don't want to do a diver standing up. Because I said, unless he's got his quarry and coming up this way, all right. But not in the position that I have the sketch in.
The public art it's a compromise in a sense that you can say it's sort of art by committee, because there's an awful
Yes.
lot of people that,
Yes.
that are involved with it. What happens, though, when you as the artist really come in, you hit some sticking point with all of these
Yes.
other people who are
Yes.
involved? How do you resolve something like that?
Just do the best you can. You do the best you can without compromising your viewpoint on it. And if you have a very, very strong viewpoint and the committee decides they want something else, it's much better for them to get another sculptor.
You
who is more
think back
amenable
to the Vietnam Memorial, for example,
Yes.
the design by Maya Lin, and how terribly controversial that
Yes,
was, and
yes, yeah.
how unhappy people were, and yet that has become one of the most engaging public sculptures of our time.
And expressive of the war and the people. Now, alongside that is a sculpture that was done to satisfy the yearning of people who wanted a more realistic situation there. And a very fine, Frederick Hart did a lovely piece of sculpture there. But there's still a question on the part of the modernists as to whether that thing should be there or there. But I agree. I think it's lovely. I love the opposition. I love opposition. If you have something sweet, I like something, you know, that's not so sweet like this character up here.
Prometheus.
Prometheus, yes.
Well, we're surrounded by works. We'll introduce each of them in a minute, but we also have some slides of some other pieces that we want to take a look at, and this is from Olympia.
Yes, this is the first fountain that I did. This is in the front of the library in Olympia. And this presented a little bit of a problem because they told me exactly what they wanted. And I couldn't do anything else besides that. I had several different abstract ideas that I wanted to put across, but they wanted something that referred back to the natural life in the area. So this is what I did.
And this
is the one. This is the one that the bronze piece that I did after the upheaval at the university, which we had tremendous upheaval, and of course I related that to Prometheus again, which is my lovely subject, and all the tortures that Prometheus went through.
Now this is a wood carving?
This is a wood carving. It's owned by my son. It's a guitar concert. It's carved in mahogany. Philippine mahogany, which is has a rather coarse grain, but it carved well. And this piece is only 6 inches high. This is a piece of Adam and Eve that I did.
And is this a bronze?
This is a bronze piece, yes. And this is carved in black walnut, laminated black walnut for Dr. and Mrs. Bierman on Mercer Island.
Mm-hmm. So this is in a private collection.
This is on private. You know, I enjoyed doing this because he gave me complete freedom.
Now here's a piece that a lot of people have seen.
Yes. This is a reconstitution of that fountain down there that I did in the Civic Center. First of all, I've always felt that 120-foot basin with 3 pieces of sculpture in it and a raised cell in the center to try to get a little more into the composition was just a little bit too formal. And I like this because it has rocks in it and it has planting on it, it has beautiful planting on it. It was done by a landscape architect, and I think he's done a beautiful, beautiful job on creating what I consider important, because the title of this piece is called The Fountain of Creation. DuPen fountain, yes, but the Fountain of Creation is what it represents. A tree of life in the center, and the birds in flight on one side and seaweed on the other.
And those 2 pieces, the last 2 slides we saw from the Seattle Center and created for the 1962 World's Fair.
Yes, this is it here. This is the tree of life.
Now that must have been an exciting time.
Yes, it was. It was. And
Now,
you know, when I had that, I had it done in New York City because in this area there weren't any bronze founders. And I sent it back in sections, and each section looked like a coffin. But that's about the size of it. And it arrived about a week before the opening of the fair. I insisted that this be on time, you know, and it did a beautiful job.
Now, we talked earlier about your philosophy of what's really essential in sculpture and letting the spirit of a piece emerge. How do you teach that to young, aspiring artists?
Well, first of all, by acquainting myself with the person and finding out just exactly what the urge of this person is, why he wants to do sculpture. And then start from that basis rather than just start with the rudiments of form and abstract shapes put together and so on. And I found that if I let the student speak through his sculpture, or try to speak, no matter how haltingly, you can add to that, you can instruct. But it's very difficult to instruct somebody that doesn't know something about putting forms together when they don't know why they're doing it. So I try to start with the person, draw him out. That's one of the first things
It's really that
I
emotional
do.
quality that you're looking for. Now, when you teach students, is there a complication introduced by I guess you'd call it a pressure to conform? Let's say a certain kind of sculpture is all the rage and it's what every collector is buying.
Yeah.
And of course a youngster says, maybe that's the kind of art that I should be creating.
Yeah, there is a very great pressure on the part of art schools to be popular. And of course, if the students do things that are what's being done in New York at this moment, and that's where the expression might be in art, that's wrong to me. That's altogether wrong. And it doesn't start at the right end with a student. And you do what you do. In sculpture, art, anything that you do in the creative field, you do what is your own feeling about things. You don't do what's out there just because it's popular. Now that's a wrong viewpoint according to sell things, salesmanship. Now I must say that our market in New York City is guided by your market and the shows that go on there.
What makes a particular style hot at any certain moment? I mean, can you, in looking at the history of what becomes popular and it gets unpopular, what drives that?
Newness. You want something you've never seen before, regardless of whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. And if it's new, it must be good. Now that's altogether wrong philosophy, but at least on my part it's wrong philosophy. I won't say that it's wrong because I say so. But anyhow, this bothers me tremendously because it doesn't come from the person. The art doesn't come from the person. It comes from the market.
Yeah, driven by the marketplace.
Well, it's fine for them to learn these things. Yes, I have no closed mind about students learning and other people learning what's going on. They should know what's going on. But they should also say, hey, that's great, but it's not for me. You see?
Just learning to listen to their own voice.
That's right.
And it's a noisy world. I bet that's not easy to do.
It's a tough one.
Well, now we're surrounded by your friends.
Yes.
A number of friends that you've brought to introduce to us. Maybe we should start.
Yeah. Well, this piece was carved from a piece of ironwood. This was given to me when I was working in the ship's industry during the Second World War, and I don't know how he got it out of there or anything about it because you weren't supposed to take anything out of the shipyards at that point. He must have got a special leeway to do that. But this piece was so hard to cut that I had to cut it with a stone carving tool.
The wood is very, I've carried it. It's incredibly heavy.
Yeah. Well, I did finish it with my wood carving tools, but I must say that after about 10 minutes I had to resharpen these things again. And but it has a tendency to split, as you see. It's hygroscopic and it wants to dry out and it seeks the water and goes back and forth and that sort of thing. I don't know why.
And that's called checking.
Yeah, that's checking, those spots in there. And some people love that checking because simply they say it's the character of the wood. All wood does this. But I think it disturbs the form, especially if you're working on something where the form counts very highly, like, for instance, sunshine back there.
Okay, now we have three different pieces on the table.
Yes.
Okay, sunshine.
Yeah, sunshine was carved out of a piece of black walnut, and this black walnut comes, it's called Western walnut, comes from Oregon. And I didn't think it would be a very good piece of wood. The color is different completely from something else.
Now there's a story. There's a story that goes with this. You have to tell the story.
Right. I carved that piece for my own house. And you see, when I come in from teaching, I'm in a mood. So either yes or no, I've done a job or haven't done a job or so and so. And as soon as I see that thing, I begin to say, yeah, what's the use of it? It doesn't count anyhow. Why not be happy with it?
Snaps you right out of that bad work mood.
I love
now
that.
This is one of your favorite subjects as a sculptor, members of your own family, in this little bronze piece.
Yeah, this represented my daughter looking out, sitting on the wharf there at Vashon. Not on a wharf, but on, what is equivalent to it, I guess. Used to be a wharf. And she's just looking out over the water. And I saw that. And of course, I geometricized as much as I possibly could, getting the accent on the angles on the piece and that sort of a thing, and based it from there. And I liked the pose. I liked the pose, and it seemed to work out all right for me in the wax. I did this direct in wax, and then from there I took a mold on it, and it was done in flexible mold.
We don't want to leave anybody out here.
All right.
So.
Sybil. Okay, Sybil was cut from a piece of wood that my good friend Tommy Wells, who was a schoolmate of mine, gave me for his schooner. And he wanted a figurehead on it. I said, Tommy, this is too small. And first of all, I don't like the shape of it. So he said, well, take that and you do what you want to do. So I carved him one out of Honduras mahogany and painted and so on. And this piece is carved out of Alaska cedar, which is a delight to carve, but I'll tell you, the smell of it just drives you absolute like a cedar chest working right over a cedar chest.
Ooh, that sounds good.
Yeah, it's very strong, very pungent. And the hole was introduced in there to keep it from checking.
And again, that's cracking.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still learning things about sculpture today. Now, this rather unhappy fellow back here on the...
Yes. Well, this is Prometheus. So the Greek myths, you know, are wonderful stories. And Prometheus brought fire from heaven. And for that he was punished by Zeus, the god. And a raven dug out his liver every day, and the liver was replaced. So it was a continuous process. So I don't know. I've always been attracted to this guy because he really, why should he bring fire from heaven to mankind, you see? This is the point. And I acquaint this piece with a nuclear holocaust, you see? So it has a metaphor, a contemporary metaphor.
Quite a swing of moods
Yes.
in that.
Yes.
And we have one more standing figure over here.
Yeah, this was kind of fun to do because this is done direct in wax, this piece. And the question is how to cast this piece. And it can't be solid. It has to be hollow. It has to be hollow because the weight would be intense, and besides that, the shrinkage would be bad on the metal. So I had to hollow it out and cast it in sections. Down to his torso is one section, and the arms are cut off, and the arms are cast separate and put on, and the same thing happened to the woman.
We have so little time left. We really
Yes.
only have about a half a minute. But I did want to ask you, the price of art seems to have gone up so much. There seems to be more attention paid to art. I mean, as an artist, is it a better situation?
Well, it's the one that you can hardly escape if you put your work in terms of a dealer. You know, they charge 50%. And so what is a sculptor supposed to do? I mean, you have to add that on to the price of your sculpture and consider that you're getting, say, 50% less, or compensate for it.
The life of
Yes.
the artist has never been easy and probably never will be.
No. And we don't really make this actually for money unless you're in commercial art. And
We can tell you do your work because you love
Yes.
it. And I want to thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
being a guest on
Thank
Upon
you, Miss
Reflection, Everett DuPen.
Thank you, Miss Alvar.
To see more UWTV classics, visit uwtv.org/classics.